Welcome to episode 12 of the Wheels and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Ben Durham, and today we have Nic Laporte joining us as our guest. He's a Vancouver-based content creator with a focus on micromobility and urbanism. While he was visiting family in London for a few days, we made time to sit down and record this episode. Nic is originally from London, Canada, but has spent the last 7 years in Vancouver, where he discovered the power of micromobility, which inspired him to explore urban development and transportation issues, both local and abroad. Him and his wife are what you would call car light, having only one car that they irregularly use. Instead, they use other means of getting around, from Nic's favorite commuter, which is his electric kick scooter, to their acoustic bicycle and public transit, and they typically only use their car for longer trips and when leaving Vancouver proper. In this episode, we discuss how Nic ended up moving from London to Vancouver, getting around by bike in small towns versus big ones, how London isn't as bad as some people on the internet make it out to be, motor normativity, why it's extraordinarily important to show up to city council meetings and have your voice heard as someone who at least somewhat understands urbanism, and much more. By the way, if you're watching this episode, I was in such a hurry because of the time crunch and last-minuteness of this recording that the focus is all messed up throughout the video. So I apologize for that. But if you're listening to this episode, everything is normal. So let's jump right in. Who are you?
We're starting there?
We'll start right there.
My name is Nic Laporte, and I'm somebody who is passionate about urbanism and micromobility, and that's as short and sweet as I could make it.
That was pretty good. So how did your journey start? Like, you come from London, and then you've ended up where?
I'm in Vancouver now.
Yep.
I've been living in Vancouver for 7 years, and I've lived in different places, but from that specific move was right from London to Vancouver, though I did spend my high school years in London. Yeah, so I've lived in many places, but yeah, the bigger picture, if you don't know who I am, my name is Nic Laporte. I have a YouTube channel with my name, Nic Laporte, and I talk about urbanism, micromobility mainly, and bicycles. Yeah. Do you want to talk about London? Should we get into London right away?
I wanted to get into the Asia bit, because that was interesting, but maybe we'll leave that to the end.
Yeah.
That was just a little nice tidbit. You can skip through if you want, but let's start with London.
Yeah.
And then your move to Vancouver and all of your thoughts surrounding that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the big picture stuff. Okay, so I grew up in southern Ontario, so near Windsor, not far from there. And after, I think it was the 10th grade, I moved to London with my family. And that was a huge shift in itself. You know, I came from a small town of Kingsville. If you don't know, it's on Lake Erie, the most southern town in Canada. And from there to here was a huge shift, because in a small town, you can bike around almost anywhere. Traffic's pretty light. People who are driving there typically live there, and it's relatively safe. Not to say you shouldn't have cycling infrastructure in small towns, but it's a shift. But when I came to London and I was 14, 15, I couldn't drive, obviously. I was too young. And there was public transport, and I could get to places. Not only that, but there were bike lanes. And I know, London isn't known as a micromobility paradise, but when you come from a small town and I can take bike paths adjacent to massive stroads, and they exist, they did there, and they still do now, I could go to a mall by myself. That's something I couldn't do before. So to me, when I moved to London, it was like this world opened up to me, right? And we'll get to how that shifted over time, but at the time, this is amazing.
And what year was this?
This was 2005.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
mid-aughts.
Got it.
When I was a teenager. And that was incredible. That was fantastic. And fast forwarding past there, just grew up the regular way, eventually got a car. Cycling was a thing that I would occasionally do for fun. I had a mountain bike. I'd go to Fanshawe and do the loop around the lake, stuff like that. But it was never a utilitarian thing for me. Never was like that until my first visit to Japan. And that was the first time, so this was 10 years after that, 2015, my first trip overseas by myself. And I just biked, not because I cared about micromobility. I had any eye for that kind of urbanism. It just was the convenient thing to do. You're in Kyoto or Osaka, you rent a bike because it's easy to get around. So that was really eye-opening for me. But after that, lived in different places, but moving from London to Vancouver is really, I think, the watershed moment.
Can I go quickly back to Japan and just the entertaining bits that I see on social about Americans or people going to Japan and then trying to rent a car and saying, why does it take longer than transit? And people are like, well, just take the train. Like
Yeah.
they're like, how do I get from city to city? And their minds cannot comprehend. And it's just a cultural thing. It makes sense. They're like, what the heck is with renting a car here in Japan?
Yeah.
And so anyways, yes, transit, bullet trains, etc. Yep. And just regular trains.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, in Japan, it's not about cycling. Cycling's not like the biggest thing there. It's very, very popular. But like in Tokyo, I've never ridden a bicycle in Tokyo because you don't need to. Especially as a tourist, you're going relatively large distances. You just get on the train because it's going to be so much easier, right? But yeah, we can talk about Asia some more because I've visited more recently too. But yeah, moving from London to Vancouver, the reason I moved is very wishy-washy. And it was that my girlfriend at the time, we had been dating for a year, loved Vancouver. I had never been. And she's like, I want to move to Vancouver. And I was like, okay, sure, let's go. So that's what we did. We packed up our car and our cat and we drove across the country. And it was supposed to be a year experiment. Just be like, hey, let's stay for a year and we'll come back. It's been 7 years. So safe to say we don't plan on moving back anytime soon. So it's been amazing. So the first thing obviously is I'd like to do when I move to a new city, get on a bike and explore. And that's when it was very apparent how different a city could be to move around. And this is like not even comparing, Japan or the Netherlands, places we've already visited before this, but in North America, we can have a place that is, relatively speaking, very friendly to cyclists. So that's what I did. I rode around. There's the seawall. There's wonderful bike lanes downtown. Again, all in context of North America. Wonderful. But yeah, and I became a fair weather utilitarian cyclist. So mainly in the summer and then the nice days, I would get on my bicycle and go to work because it was about 5 kilometers uphill and then back downhill on the way back. And that was it. That was kind of it for a few years. And I enjoyed it. I liked it. I would go to Canadian Tire or Best Buy on my bike because it's not far away from where we live. And it was useful, but it wasn't really, it didn't explode yet. And the real moment that started this whole journey that I've been on for the past 2 to 3 years was when a colleague of mine was always riding an electric scooter to work. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like every day, every day, it didn't matter what the weather was. He'd show up on his electric scooter. He was only 2 or 3 kilometers away, but that's how he would get to work. And I was just curious. So he let me ride it one day and I was like, this is fun. That was the only takeaway. This is fun. I want one. Lo and behold, like many people, a few days later, searching the internet, and I just pulled the trigger. I bought, the famous 9-bot Max G30P. It's very well known. It's the most popular scooter you'll see around.
We have one in our garage.
Yeah, I still have it. My wife uses it when the weather's crappy and she gets to work on that. But that was the moment. As soon as I got that in my hands, I became a full-time micromobility user, utilitarian user, at least for work and many more trips that I might have taken on a bike, right?
For sure.
Or sorry, in a car even. So that was the moment. And I had already been making YouTube videos about personal computers, myths, how-tos and stuff like that. And it was going in a good direction. But I kind of thought, why am I doing this? What's the ends of this? And it's just consumerism, buying more computer parts, wasting time on computer games and stuff like that. And I said, no, I want to change. And after seeing so many great YouTubers and great channels about urbanism and cycling, I said, I could do that. So I pivoted, started a new channel, and that's what we have today, which is Nic Laporte. That's me.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
What is the door side of things?
The door is simply that when I started a Twitter account, the handle Nic Laporte was taken. So I changed it from French to English because Laporte is French for the door. And that's it. There's nothing special about it other than that.
That does add a bit of clarity, though.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense now. Okay.
Yeah.
No, wow. Now I know you. Hi. Hi, Nick. I feel like I now know your kind of story. And so you were mentioning, I think before we started rolling, that you come back every year or so just to visit family here?
Yeah, in London area. Still have family who lives in London. The girlfriend I moved to Vancouver with is my wife. We've been married for about 1.5 years now. And her family lives in London. She grew up in London. I think she went to the same high school as you.
Oh, over, I guess
near Masonville,
exactly,
that area,
yeah.
North London, let's say.
Yes, yeah.
No need to get too specific. But yeah, so it's always fun coming back, seeing what's changed, seeing what hasn't changed. Overall, I've seen a lot of good things in London, which is wonderful to see because of how much, well, maybe there's an elephant in the room, big orange elephant in the room that says certain things about London and North America that out of context makes London seem like one of the worst cities in North America, which as much as I have a lot of things I could say about London that I don't like, it is absolutely not that when it comes to urbanism and especially cycling. Like, we're right here at Springbank Park. The TVP is right here. And it is still one of my favorite crosstown greenways in North America that I've ever visited. Like, it's so nice. It is so nice.
I know a couple who are from the US.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. They have retired, but they chose London, Ontario, Canada as the place to retire because of the TVP.
Wow.
Because they are, yes, they like cycling, but also like hardcore cycling. But they're a retired age, and they're like, hey, we also want to be able to go down to one car and just also do errands and get around on a bike. And what actually lured them was they looked at the time, I think it was 2017, there was the London Master Cycling Plan. That is, I botched that. It's something else. Now it's the Master Mobility Plan.
Right.
But it was like this cycling master plan. That sounds right. That's probably it. And that is what convinced them, because they looked at it, they looked at what the future might bring, and they're like, sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we already have the TVP, but all of the extra connections within London is what sold them. They're like, this looks to be like it's going to be a cycling city. And they already have that base network for the, if it's nice weather, getting around. What I mean by that is they don't plow the TVP. But yeah.
That's something that really needs to be taken seriously, I think, in a lot of cities. And that's something even in Vancouver, when it comes to winter riding, can be a problem. Like, Vancouver's very temperate, but every year we get, a week or two of snow and sometimes a big dump. And, you'll see comments of people in the community. It's like, oh, how's your bicycle doing now? I'm like looking at the roads or seeing Twitter even and looking at all the car crashes that happened in the past 12 hours during that snowstorm and be like, how's your car doing? Like, what do you mean? Like, the whole city shuts down because we just don't have that ability to clear the snow because it's not worth it for that week that we get it,
It's kind of like Texas vibes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you get it 1 inch of snow and the city shuts down because you're just not prepared. Because there's actually, debatably, not really a great reason to prepare for that, except for, okay, I can think of a few. Safety.
Exactly, yeah. But back to London, yeah, it's changed a lot. What I love seeing is the infrastructure that we're getting here. Even certain intersections, like there's protected intersections in this city. Like, go to so many other North American cities and you'll see nothing even close to what London has. And I'm not saying London's in the top 10 probably. No, not quite there, but it's moving in the right direction. And that's something we're not even seeing in other cities. Like, Vancouver has stalled, guys. I love Vancouver so much, but the current council don't like bikes very much. And it's a problem. So, there's advocacy groups working on that and trying to work with that council to get even anything. But yeah. When you're moving in the right direction, don't stop pushing because things can change.
So I have been in council chambers here at London quite a few times, and we've spoken up, my now wife and I, Natalia.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I guess they always say like nothing changes. And it's like the day after you're like, wow, it must feel so different. No, we're just continuing on our lives. But
it's just fun to say my wife.
I know. I'm only just getting used to it. You can kind of tell because I'm like, my wife?
Yeah.
So we go there. And at one point, I'll leave him unnamed. He mentioned at that specific public session, there were a lot of people who were active transport advocates. And he called it out. He's like, there is a disproportionate number of people who have one way of thinking right now. And part of it was like climate stuff. And he's just like, hey, so like you guys are showing up and maybe the blue collar workers or other workers might not be able to get time off or whatnot. And it is unfair to show up like in these numbers when other people can't. And it's like, what? But as you're just saying, if you let off just for a moment, then suddenly it's not on people's minds,
Yeah.
especially council's minds.
Yeah.
So no, it is really important to continue, even though sometimes you're saying, hey, there's great advances happening in London. And I agree. And then there's a lot of disconnected grid as well. And that, like, it's happening. It is closing. Like, all the gaps are closing. That's great. But you just have to keep on keeping on. I don't see another option, really.
Absolutely. And London has the bones for it. And I've said this. I made a video, if you want to check it out. It talks about fake London. You can just look on my channel. It's one of the most viewed videos on my channel.
I think that's actually where I discovered you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talk about that. London has great bones. Like, it has that old downtown grid, which grids are amazing, especially when they're smaller blocks, amazing for transforming them into micromobility paradises, because it does exactly what a suburb's meant to do, which is make a convoluted area so it's hard to travel through, so you don't get through traffic. But that's only for cars, where bikes and pedestrians can move through freely. So that's what could really be done downtown. But on top of that, you have these pseudo town centers, which is the malls, White Oaks, Masonville, and Westmount, that can be transformed into their own town centers within the city.
I have good news for you. Over on the Masonville side of things, that parking lot is due for a makeover with... they're going to replace the parking lot with residential high-rises.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's a start.
It's a transit corridor right there.
Yeah.
They don't have the LRT happening. That was a whole botched thing. I kind of want to make a mini doc on Downshift London at some point, because that was just a select few people. This is what I meant earlier when I was rambling about the showing up. And like, hey, disproportionate amount of people showing up and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, a small number of people showed up and basically shut down. So business owners down in downtown London, which is ironic because it would actually help them get students from Western, let's say, and other places. I don't get why they botched LRT, but anyways.
It's all political, right? London doesn't have the population to support that. It's like, yeah, okay. We're talking about 500,000 people now. It's like, you really screwed that up.
Yeah. And especially with the West and North Branch, people are now realizing, oh, there's a lot of traffic volume with vehicles. Maybe we need more lanes. No. We needed LRT, at least BRT. Anyways, that's a whole other discussion. I wanted to talk about one thing that you were just saying about the permeability of neighborhoods. So we were in Vancouver and we were biking around, as you do, as you said, when you're exploring a new city, you bike around. It's like the perfect pace because it's not walking. It's a little bit too slow. Sometimes you get off your bike and you walk. That's fine.
Yeah.
But to get places... Driving is silly because then you have to find parking. You don't know where it is because you're not a local, etc. It costs, blah, 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 and just doesn't make sense. But biking is great. So here we are biking through, and there's a lot of filtered permeability. That's nice because it allows through traffic for pedestrians and cyclists and calms the streets. And we really found that made a difference in how we felt safer, along with yes, there's perceived safety, but it was safe too. So
that can go a long way, right? When it's talked about perceived safety, someone feels safe, they're going to bike more people bike, safety in numbers. It's all synergistic, right? But if we want to talk about Vancouver for a moment, I'd love to get into this whole thing.
Please.
So if you're not familiar with Vancouver, if you can, look at a map. Maybe I'll convince Ben to put up a map right now on the screen so you can see it. Talking about Vancouver proper, the north part is where the downtown is, and that's where the bulk of the good infrastructure really is. And as you move further south towards Richmond, it gets crappier and crappier. Not just the lack of dedicated cycling infrastructure or separated cycle tracks and things like that get fewer and fewer, but the actual neighborhood bikeways get worse. And what I mean by that, you're talking about these modal filters that exist. Those are generally in the north half of the city, like north of King Edward. Once you get south of there, they become more and more rare, where some are non-existent. Like one corridor I'm thinking of is Heather, which is kind of in the center of the city. It comes from VGH, which is kind of pointed towards downtown, all the way down to Southwest Marine Drive, which is the most southern major thoroughfare in the city. And it goes 5 kilometers without a single modal filter. So what's the difference between that and the neighboring street, other than a little sharrow on the street and a sign up beside the street? There's nothing. And you see that a lot of the times, especially when it's rush hour or school gets out, these bikeways become absolutely clogged with through traffic. And it's one of my biggest gripes in Vancouver is that those networks, these biking streets, bike routes, whatever you want to call them, should be the backbone of a solid AAA network, and they're not there. They're not in Vancouver.
I have been hearing stuff like this as the years have progressed. Obviously, Not Just Bikes has big orange, Not Just Bikes. But no, he has put out a lot of stuff, and I think the perception of London being just horrible has I can't words today. Proliferated. That's the word. Has just become commonplace online. Especially when I started posting, it was a lot of comments saying, "This is fake London." I'm like, yeah, it is London. And I've gradually started to not call it that, because it's like, hey guys, it is London, Canada. As I hear about, let's say, Vancouver and how its active transportation has stalled ever so slightly, and other places where cities and people want to show the best of their cities, but then they, exclude all of the negatives, whether it's to do with the active transportation or the built design of the streets, or with something to do with the economy or other things, or there's a lot that goes into city building. And sometimes it's just bad weather or something. It's like, hey, have you considered that the weather there is not great? I don't know. But so really quickly, I wanted to talk about how cities are multifaceted, and it's not only about active transportation, because I saw you in the comment of Tom's channel, Shifter, over in Edmonton or Calgary.
Yeah.
Calgary now. Wait, he's in both. Alberta in general.
He's in Alberta. Yeah,
there we go.
Accurate.
Your comment was to do with how you guys have considered. Well, okay, I'll let you say it.
Yeah, so it was on Tom's most recent, well, I don't know if it's most recent now when you're watching this, but it's a video about the cost differences of transportation depending on where you plan to live. And I had mentioned that I was going to share the video with my wife, because she's talking about, moving away from we're close to downtown Vancouver, moving away from downtown, we can get more space, maybe save money. And apart from the whole thing about how housing costs have skyrocketed in the past 5 years, I keep mentioning transportation to her, because we have one car. We both take bikes or scooters to work, and for most utilitarian trips we use micromobility, but we use our car to get out of the city. And I keep bringing this back to her. Even if we moved back to Ontario, we'd end up spending more monthly, because we would likely need a second car, if not just use that one car way more than we're using it now. So that's a big thing that people don't realize is a massive cost in just your monthly budget. Like, it's insane. $10,000 is like the average. That was from like 2021. I know Tom mentioned that in his video. So it's gotten more than that right now for a car, owning a car. So you're looking at almost $1,000 a month to own a car. It's a huge expense. And that's something I've seen right after really switching over to micromobility, is just how little it's costing. Like, not having to fill your gas tank. Like, okay, this week I filled a lot of gas tanks, done a lot of driving. Not a fan. I don't love it, but you really see how much you can spend just on fuel. It's insane. And I have my own video about this, how much it costs to fill your electric scooter for a year. You know how much it is? It's not even worth worrying about. It was like, if you rode, I think it was between 3,000 and 5,000 kilometers a year, it was like $15
per year.
Like that would get you on, like, I don't know, not even a week of commuting a typical commute distance in a car.
After a week, that's like
maybe a couple days.
2 days, depending on your commute. It really does depend on that.
Yeah.
But no, it is like, okay, I actually have a story about how infrequently we use our car. And that is why I was a little bit later today, because we got back from camping where we did put about 1,000 kilometers on our car. We went up to like Bon Echo region. It was very nice canoe camping. And that's kind of what we keep one car for. And for days where one of us needs to use it, etc. It is convenient in London or in Ontario where we don't have trains, etc. Although I did see some buses going up there to remote areas. I'm like, oh, wow, that's really awesome, because you don't need a huge amount of stuff, and those buses could be prepped to maybe not handle a canoe. That's what rentals are for. But to like put your loads of stuff underneath, like have a few bags, minimize a bit, and you can still go camping without a car. That was awesome to see. I had not seen that before. Maybe my eyes were just not open to that.
Yeah, well, you can go camping on a bike.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
I've seen a lot of people I follow on Instagram love doing that. It's pretty cool.
We are planning on doing that too. And there's
That's
another
awesome.
story for another day about how we did that, and I may have short-circuited my DIY e-bike, and that that's a whole other story. It was funny. Maybe not at the time, but no. So, okay, we put a bunch of kilometers on our car. That was the general gist of that story. But this morning, we still had all our camping stuff in there, and we were going to go make a run to donate a bunch of stuff because we're clearing out some stuff. And the car's just full. It was laughable because a few podcasts ago, we were talking about would you store a wardrobe on a sidewalk or in your driveway? No. But we definitely used our car as storage, like the buffer between getting things out of the house.
Yeah.
And then I go to put all my gear in. I have a shoot today. And I'm like, oh, crap. It is entirely full of just like, there was food barrels and like coolers and camping gear and sleeping bags. I'm like, we did not empty this because we haven't driven in 8 days since getting back. And so but we've left the house numerous times because Natalia goes and she bikes to places. She had to hit up Home Depot a few times. She did some grocery runs. I did some grocery runs. I had to go to other places. We get around so often. The car sits in the driveway. But then, I guess we could do a car rental.
Yeah, you probably can. But it like there is something to having that available right away. Like having to deal with a car rent, like a traditional car rental, big pain in the ass if you're just doing it, twice a month. That's a lot. But if you have something like a car share, I know we have Evo for like down in Vancouver, or I think Moto. I don't know if that's more widespread. I think that's something that other people use for like more varied type of longer term shared cars.
I did mention the buses going up to there, but we were in a very small lake up at that camping trip, and I even shot this footage right here actually, of this Commune Auto rental car. Okay. And it's just a little wee car, and I'll make a video about it, but it's just like this little wee car. You don't need much. Like that's why the shuttle buses up there work, because you're camping. You don't need to bring along a huge amount of stuff. You can minimize. But yeah, Commune Auto got them all the way up there. So that's an example of them not having a car and just renting.
Yeah.
So I guess that's an option. There's so many options. It really is. Okay, I will say this one thing. I was told recently by someone on city staff, actually, to not use alternative mode of transportation as much as I was. And I'm like, oh, why so? And it's because alternatives. It's an alternative to the car. It's like, okay, well, it's not an actual solution. It's just an alternative. It's like, no. There's different options. It's like, that one word makes so much difference.
Yeah, that's a word of motornormativity, right? Is using all these ways we can get around as alternatives when they're just completely legitimate ways to get around. Even though people online will tell you, why are you riding a bike? Are you a child or something? It's like, I got to work just like my other colleagues who drove. I don't know. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had more fun doing it. There's definitely that.
Exactly. Ooh, actually, that brings me to the scooter. Okay. We might be wrapping up shortly because I have to get back to work. But can you tell me more about how you like to take your scooter to work instead of biking?
Okay. The difference being that my bike is an acoustic bike, non-electric bike, and the scooter is fully electric, and I don't have to pedal. So there's that. But I did make a video about this, explaining why I ride a scooter. And the premise was basically there are different motivations for somebody to use one type of micromobility over another. And they're all completely legitimate. And that's not just to defend myself for riding a scooter. But for example, if I want to store my scooter, it's much more easy to get it in my building because I have to take it up the elevator. It's smaller, it's more nimble. I can fold it down and tuck it under things. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons. That being said, e-bikes are my absolute favorite micromobility device. I love e-bikes so much. They're just so much fun. It's just like pure joy. You feel like you're flying.
I know. Like that first feeling, it's just amazing. I don't know if you've seen those GoPro footages. Wow, I'm old now. The GoPro footages of the first rides, like people experiencing e-bikes for the first time. Yeah, it's a joy to watch. Just because people are like, whoa, like it is like flying.
Yeah.
But e-scooting is also like we use it for shorter trips and like going to the grocery store when we just need a few things. We bring it in with us. So just like with you, I had watched that video last year that you're talking about, but I totally forget. You brought it in and put it on your desk or no?
At work, I can put it under my desk.
Okay.
Yeah, or beside my desk. It doesn't matter. It can tuck away easily. I don't have to leave it outside, locked in the rain and the cold, and worrying about it getting stolen, because that is a problem like many cities in Vancouver. So that is also very convenient too. It's just more convenient in that sense. I would much rather be riding on an e-bike. You know, just there's certain motivations and pros that work for my lifestyle. So yeah, that's why I ride an e-scooter for now.
That is totally fair. And I think that we call them bike lanes, but brainstorming sesh right here. What is a better name? Because like I constantly see the mobility scooters and e-scooters and e-bikes and bicycles. It's an active transportation network grid.
Active transportation is one I like. However, it does indicate that you're actively moving. On an e-scooter, it's not really the case, or you're hitting a throttle with your thumb. You might use a little bit more calories than driving, but it's not that much. Yeah, it's a tough one. And it's one that I always come back to and I think about, because I use bicycle, I say bike lane, I'm talking about bikes because that's the vernacular that people understand. Once you start parting that out, it makes it a lot more difficult for people to get engaged with it, because they just don't know what you're talking about. When I say micromobility, people don't know what that means a lot of the time. They're like, what's that? By the way, the definition of micromobility, if you're curious, is basically an electric or human-powered machine that weighs under 500 kilograms. And that's the official definition. I don't personally agree with it. I think it should be like, there's an extra thing that says, but it's also like the smallest practical thing that you could use for a trip or something. Because like 500 kilograms, that's like a Fiat.
Was it kilograms or pounds?
Kilograms. That's like a Fiat 500.
Okay, yeah.
Like the old one. I mean, that was gas-powered, so that doesn't count, but you get the idea.
Or does it count? What about the, oh God,
Gas
two-stroke gas-powered bicycles?
Does not count. It has to be human-powered or electric.
Oh, yeah. Also, if I'm offending anyone, I just have a problem with them for a lot of reasons. They're kind of dangerous too. Like they're not very safe for many reasons, but that's a whole other podcast. I realize that they're inexpensive, but actually not in the long run. Okay, here's my 10-second spiel on this. They're inexpensive up front, but those components fall apart because of the internal combustion nature of exploding things. Like the tiny little engine that you put on a bicycle to make it go forward, they break very, very quickly. Then you have to maintain them, which costs money. Then you have to fuel them, which it's negligible costs because it's such a small tank. And the smell and the sound and they don't add anything good to society.
Yeah, no.
They're just not great.
No. That's a big problem in many, many countries, is the small two-stroke engines. They're just the stink. You can't get away from it. It's all consuming.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Bike lanes are pretty good at stating what they are.
I think it conveys it right. But yeah, active transportation, micromobility, it's a mouthful. I have a hard time saying that word sometimes. Sometimes I trip over it.
Micromobility.
Yeah. It turns into something like that. So yeah, I don't think it matters too much, but I think, like you were saying earlier, it's more about changing the norm in the way we look at moving and transportation. Alternative transportation, let's just stop using that as much as we can. That's one thing we can start. Yeah.
Yep. Other options of getting around, or not even other options. I just botched it there. It's like, what are your options of getting around?
Yeah.
They're all equal. Boom. Done.
Yeah.
And there's a different tool for every job.
Yeah. And it's something that you see a lot of pushback on. It's like, oh, I can't take my bike for this trip or that trip. Like, you want me to bike everywhere? It's like, no, that's not the case. Can we just take everybody to the Netherlands for a week just to check it out? Let me tell you, there are cars. There's a lot of cars. I drove a car for 3 days and it was great, but it was also much better on a bicycle, in my opinion. But it's not about taking away options. It's about having more options and equitable options. That's what it's about.
Yep.
Yeah.
There we go.
Preaching the choir here.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So,
like, if you're listening to this far, you already know this stuff, but hopefully it gets you fired up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we go. Well, I think we are at the end here. So I think it might be time to wrap up.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts on this very last minute?
I do. I have one thing, and
podcast.
It's something I want to keep saying anytime I'm able to talk on someone else's platform. It's that I'm not a particularly intelligent person. I call myself a midwit. Okay. So what I'm leading to is that I'm doing this, but what I'd like to do, at least if I could do anything, is inspire some people more intelligent and more talented than myself to get in this space, because it's all synergistic. This is not a zero-sum game. If if this town, this city, and across North America turns into an urbanist paradise tomorrow, I will stop making videos because that's what I want. I think it's what a lot of us want. So spread the word, even if it's doing, like, if you could do advocacy, that's like top priority. Please do that. I praise all the advocates that I've talked to, people I know, friends I have. And if you want to make content, do that too, because the more the merrier. That's all I'm saying. Get out there, make it happen. It's not going to happen by itself.
I would happen to agree.
Yeah.
I'm there with you. I'm not the smartest person out there. We are not urban planners.
No.
We just are making content
Yeah.
to get the word out.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a good reminder. You know who else is not an urban planner? The NIMBY at your local meeting complaining about bike lanes. So you can put your opinion out there. You don't have to be an expert to talk about the things. Talk about the place you live in. Everybody's qualified.
These are my closing thoughts going off of that. As the internet is like, there are so many people saying so many things. You speak something about something in another country and you're not qualified necessarily. You don't live there. But when you are talking at council about your neighborhood and your backyard and saying, yes, I want that density, or yes, I would love this to go in, or no, I don't want the lanes widened, and yes, I would like more of my hard-earned taxes. That was a hint at the gas taxes that everyone's always on about with the drivers. I want those to go to public services and public infrastructure and everything. Do that, because if you're not there, you're not there. Like, the NIMBYs are more likely to show up than people are likely to show up saying, yes, I want these things. So that, yeah, you don't need to make content. You don't need to do that. Just show up to local council, because your voice matters more than maybe talking about another country or something. Not that doesn't
Absolutely.
help. Like, comparing is great. Like, anyways, we didn't even cover your Asia stuff. I guess that just means I have to come to Vancouver.
Come on down. Yeah, anytime. Yeah, anytime we could do a bike tour. It'll be a great time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get to do the ride along, so I'll just have to go to Vancouver for that.
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, can I do my little plug here?
Yeah,
Shameless
please do.
plug. Yeah, if you want to find me, I'm on Threads, Instagram, Twitter, not so much, but YouTube's my main platform. My handle is Nic the Door or Nic Laporte. You can find me there. But I also have a podcast with a few other people, which Ben was on. He was our first guest, which is called Radio Free Urbanism. You can find it anywhere you find your podcast to listen to that. I think it was episode 10 if you want to listen to Ben.
It's funny because my call to action at the end was so botched, because I was like, oh yeah, I don't know what I offer in the world. Because I was kind of in a transition as well. I'm like, yeah, I do this and maybe some product reviews, and which I'm going to be getting back into along with all of the urbanism and other things, and now the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to have categories. But at that point, listening back to it, I was like, oh boy.
And that was another last minute thing, like the day of, we're like, can you come to our podcast? We need to fill in. And you're like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, it was, I feel like just we are the last minute crew. There we go.
It's been working out. Yeah.
Yep. So far, so good.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for talking.